Hello everyone, welcome back into the studio. My name is Eirik, and today we're continuing to sculpt on the final large-scale maquette in the Fall of Jericho project. If you want to see and learn more from me, you can check out the link to my Patreon page linked in the description below the video, but for now let's get into sculpting. With pelvis and ribcage built, we need to deal with contours or the outline of the body, and this is where things start to go awry for many people, many students. Since our views of the figure are not what we're used to seeing, we often get contours going all over the place and thus not making sense visually to you. Contours that travel in ways you have rarely seen before are likely going to be much less useful to you than you would think. Consider that contours should be built more or less in the same way that you would if the figure were built upright. A big one would be the contours for the abdomen, for example, which isn't a contour at all here. At least not from any view we can easily access. I'd still build contours down the middle of the abdomen in the same way that I would do for my standing figures, because this is what I'm used to looking at. This is what we're used to seeing, and it makes our sculpture look figure-like, and not like a bunch of random clay walls going everywhere, which is very anti-representational, which I really don't like. The contours should connect the bony masses to each other in a logical fashion, and this is where your knowledge of anatomy comes into play as well. You have to keep in mind that what the contours you're building are, and not just what they look like. You have to carefully consider where the contours start and where they end, and knowing what the contour is in terms of anatomy makes this 1,000 times easier to do. We know where the abdominal wall starts. It starts at the bottom of the sternum, and we know that it ends at the bottom of the pelvis. We can therefore build it from the bottom of the box we established and pull it towards where we know it needs to end, which is at the bottom of the sternum, of course. This makes our abdominal wall be placed logically where it needs to go and visually in a way where we can sort of make sense of what it is that we're looking at. Keep in mind where the contours are placed normally when working through any area, and try to place them in the same way, even though the reclining figure doesn't always give you a chance to observe these contours as objectively as you'd like. Even so, placing contours in familiar places makes the figure look figure-like. It makes the figure look familiar, and this propels us forward throughout the process as we get a sculpture that looks more and more like something and not more and more like nothing. The core of the figure comes first. This is the pelvis and the ribcage and their connection to each other through the spine. From there we need to move outwards and continue to establish the rest of the figure. To begin the shoulders, we need to know where they are going to begin, and the origin of the shoulders of this discovery is the PON, which we've already found, and this is where the clavicles and the neck extend out from, so it's a good place to start figuring out the shoulders. We're looking for the distal end of the clavicle, which is where the clavicles end at the shoulders. Distal means furthest point away from center, while medial means closest to the center. So the medial end of the clavicle is at the PON, which we already know where is, and the distal end is found at the shoulder. So it makes sense then to travel through the clavicles from the PON to the shoulders. We can know some things to be true about the clavicles and thus place them decently well, though some things are going to be hard to deal with. But let's deal with the easy stuff first. One clavicle is about as long as the length of the sternum. We've already established this length, and therefore figuring out the clavicles should not be too hard. They are also a bit longer overall when put together, as compared to the width of the pelvis. This is especially true for male figures. They should of course be more or less symmetrical in length, as each clavicle is a bone, and thus it should be symmetrical in length, otherwise one shoulder is going to be wider than the other, and that's rarely the case. And they're also going to be symmetrical more or less in shape. They're bone, and so they're not going to bend, so they should be actually symmetrical in shape no matter what the position of the shoulder is. Not necessarily symmetrical in position, but symmetrical in shape. As I begin, I try to keep the shape and length symmetrical. Any visual asymmetry for shape often comes from the movement of the arm and what the clavicle is interacting with on its way from the PON to the shoulder. Often the shoulder muscles or the pectoral muscle sort of messes with it. But underneath, it is symmetrical. The shape of the clavicles do vary somewhat person to person, Some people have more straight clavicles, some people have more movement in their clavicles, but in general they mimic the look of old school bicycle handles, both from the front and also from above. A big part of the reclining figure is to observe each part of the body on equal terms on its own, and not so much as part of the whole as we might do in a standing figure. Place yourself and your work in a manner where we eliminate as much foreshortening as we possibly can, and therefore make it easier to judge what we're looking at. Once we sculpt the calves, we're going to need a completely different view than what we need for the thighs, and sometimes there are going to be differences between each thigh even. Overcomplicating things like this can get in your way and make life more difficult than it needs to be, let's say. So keep it simple and make sure that it makes sense. As contours are being built out, and there isn't much space to do so here because of the small scale, but as they're being built out from the initial little clay on the armature, the anatomical information or internal information that sits between the contours are also being built out. Letting the contours get too far ahead of what happens in between them or behind them is, I find, a recipe for a lot of difficulty in recognizing what it is that we're looking at. Flexibility is needed because I'm never as accurate as I'd like to be, or the thing always needs to change. My sculptures always need changes made to them. This is in large part the nature of the beast when it comes to sculpting in clay, so it's not like a self-deprecating thing here, it's just the way that it is. But on the other end of the spectrum, I need recognizability, so the sculpture, as it progresses, actually starts to look like something, and ideally looks like something early on. Partially this is perhaps for my own satisfaction, but I'd like to think that it also has a lot to do with being able to look at the sculpture and judge it for what it is. The less recognizable the sculpture is, the harder it is to judge, but the more flexible it often is. Therefore, we need to find a balance where we can have the best of both worlds, and for me this comes from having the contours built slightly proud of the volumes below, but never letting that distance between the two get so great that I lose the ability to look at my sculpture and see a human, or whatever it is that I'm trying to sculpt. As you've seen, plenty of work here has been done with my hands, and I prefer it that way if I'm blocking a figure in. I prefer to use my hands for as long as possible and not switch to tools until I really can't do what I'd like to do with my hands anymore, or I can't do what I'd like to do with my hands anymore. Hands keep the work a bit broader and makes the clay go on faster. Tools come into play when the pieces of clay I add need to be more accurate and specific, or they get too small to comfortably place with my hands. There are also rakes and loops, and these are metal wire tools that I'll use to remove clay from the sculpture. Most of the time I'm going to use a rake to refine the contours here, and I'm using it sort of like sandpaper to refine and adjust whatever contour I build to be more specific, but also to be a little bit more pretty and nice. I'd like my contours to flow together in a visually continuous line, as this is what it does in nature. Tools, however, are all about preference, so use the ones that you like and get good at using them. Get used to using them. As the block-in concludes or gets closer to being concluded, which just means the full figure is up there close to its final dimensions, we can also start to add more anatomical information to the sculpture. There is a timing aspect to this that's often hard to get right. It's very easy to add too much anatomy too soon and have great difficulty bringing all that information out to the borders in a structurally sound way, often leading to a figure that simply looks broken from the inside and doesn't retain its solidity as an object. At the same time, you can build out too much before adding anatomical details and information, and thus run into the issue of not having enough space to explore what the surface looks like before reaching your final dimensions, often overshooting the final dimensions and getting a figure that appears bloated and too wide for its height. Timing is key, and nothing can be said from me to teach you how to time this, how to learn timing, if you will. However, keep it in mind and learn from experience. reflect on what goes right and what goes wrong, and try your best to adjust for the next time around. That's it for today's video. We'll finish this figure up in the next video where we'll talk more about modeling and less about proportions and blocking in. Thank you for watching until the end of the video. I hope you learned a thing or two that you can take with you into your own practice. Please let me know what you thought about the video in the comments below, and until next time, stay creative.